Deep in the Swedish forest, under the curling roots of an old pine tree, lived 4 tiny children, no taller than a mushroom cap. Their world was a place of enchantment and danger, where every berry gathered and every lesson learned held the weight of survival. But what can this century-old fable teach us about our own search for meaning in a vast, indifferent world? The answer lies in the quiet wisdom of the Tomtebarnen, the children of the forest, and their timeless struggle to belong. The forest floor stretched endlessly from the perspective of 4 children who stood barely taller than wild strawberries. Tom, the oldest, could brush his hand against the underside of a toadstool without stretching. Harriet wore acorn caps as hats, while Sam and Daisy wove their clothes from lichen and spider silk. Their home hid within the hollow space beneath gnarled pine roots, where the earth smelled of damp wood and crushed juniper berries. Beyond their sheltered nook, the forest presented constant threats. A hedgehog lumbering through ferns became a rolling boulder. A crow's shadow signaled potential abduction. An evening dew transformed grass blades into slippery bridges over bottomless chasms. Everything demanded careful negotiation. Even rainfall could flood their home if they neglected to divert the tiny streams forming around their doorstep. Yet within this precarious existence lay unexpected advantages. Their small size allowed them to harvest nectar from flowers foxes couldn't reach, take shelter in abandoned mouse holes during storms, and travel unseen along hidden fungal networks between trees. Each morning began with practical lessons from Mrs. Owl, who taught arithmetic using pebbles and geography by having them memorize bark patterns on nearby trees. Afternoons meant foraging. Tom scanned the highest bushes for cloudberries, while Harriet tested mushrooms for edibility. The younger twins gathered cotton grass, spinning its fibers into thread that their mother wove into blankets thin as tissue paper. Elsa Beskow's illustrations capture these moments with remarkable sensory precision, the way sunlight filters through birch leaves to dapple the children's faces, or how their bare feet leave faint impressions in the moss. This miniature society thrived on intricate interdependence. Tom's height let him spot edible plants from afar, while Daisy's nimble fingers could extract seeds from the tightest pine cones. Sam memorized every animal path within a half-mile radius, and Harriet possessed an uncanny sense for impending weather changes. Their survival depended not just on individual skills, but on sharing knowledge without hesitation. Beneath the looming trees, their vulnerability became the very thing that bound them together, each child's weakness compensated by another's strength. In their perpetual state of careful alertness, the Tomtebarnen developed heightened awareness we've largely lost. They noticed when ants changed their foraging routes, understood which tree roots would first sense approaching rain, and could distinguish between 100 shades of green in the undergrowth. Their smallness forced a profound intimacy with their environment, turning every limitation into an occasion for creative adaptation. Perhaps their greatest lesson lies in this paradox. Being small made their world larger. Where we stride past ecological details, they inhabited them. Their story reflects our own human predicament, creatures suspended between fragility and resilience, forever negotiating our place within systems vaster than ourselves. Like the Tomtebarnen, we build meaning, not despite our constraints, but through them. The Tomtebarnen's days revolved around tasks that blurred the line between routine and necessity. Each summer morning began with Harriet inspecting their food stores. not in cupboards, but in hollowed-out knots of trees and under carefully placed stones. The slightest miscalculation in their provisions could mean starvation when snow sealed the forest in silence. Tom would spend hours shaking ripe lingonberries from bushes, catching them in a woven leaf basket, while the twins scoured the ground for hazelnuts displaced by squirrels. Every item demanded processing: berries dried on rock surfaces, mushrooms threaded onto pine needles to hang from branches, fish scales scraped clean with thorns. Winter preparation dominated their thoughts even in midsummer. The children gathered wool caught on brambles from passing sheep, teasing the fibers apart to spin into winter caps. Their mother used beetle shell needles to knit these into garments so fine they could fold into a walnut shell. This constant labor wasn't mere busy work. Cross-cultural studies of subsistence communities show how shared manual tasks build neural pathways for patience and delayed gratification. The Tomtebarnen learned early that today's work stored tomorrow's warmth, their hands always moving, even as their eyes watched for danger. The forest refused predictability. A bumper crop of blueberries one year might vanish the next when bears descended earlier than usual. Sam once returned with a gash across his palm after mistaking a shrew's cached beetles for abandoned food, teaching them all that even apparent windfalls carried risks. They developed contingency plans like marking alternative nut groves and maintaining secret emergency caches. Psychological research on hunter-gatherer societies reveals how such environmental uncertainties forge strong collaborative instincts, where individual hoarding would mean collective demise. Their work cycles created natural mentorship rituals. By autumn, Daisy could identify 17 edible moss varieties while trailing behind Harriet, just as younger siblings in traditional cultures learn through observation rather than formal instruction. Evening repairs became storytelling time. As Tom wound fresh spider silk onto spools made of birch bark, he'd recount near misses with foxes, reinforcing survival knowledge through narrative. Anthropologists note how manual activities paired with oral traditions enhance memory retention in pre-literate societies. The children's labor transcended subsistence through subtle symbolism. When they lined their winter nest with down from abandoned bird nests, they enacted a ritual of continuity, borrowing what others had left behind to ensure their own future. Modern psychology identifies such purposeful manual work as an antidote to existential anxiety, providing tangible markers of progress against life's uncertainties. Their spinning wheels turned raw fibers into coherent threads, much as their daily routines wove random forest offerings into sustained existence. This microcosm reflects humanity's eternal negotiation with necessity. Like early agricultural societies who transformed wild landscapes through coordinated effort, the Tomtebarnen's survival hinged on reading nature's patterns while imposing their own small order upon it. Their stories suggest that labor, far from being mere drudgery, structures meaning by connecting individual actions to communal endurance. When every task carries visible consequences, work becomes inseparable from identity, a truth our industrialized world often obscures. As winter's approach tightened its grip, their preparations took on new urgency. Harvested seeds needed sorting into those for eating and those for next year's planting, an act of faith in cycles larger than themselves. Yet even as they secured their own survival, their attention began turning outward to neighbors facing the same long night. Even as the first frost tightened their grip, the Tomtebarnen began assembling small parcels of provisions, not for themselves, but for their forest neighbours. Harriet packed dried elderberries into acorn caps, while Sam tied bundles of preserved grass seeds with strands of willow bark. These offerings would be left at the base of the great oak for field mice, tucked into crevices for squirrels, and hung from low branches for winter birds. Their mother cautioned them never to empty their own stores completely. Generosity without prudence was its own kind of folly, but insisted that sharing strengthened the invisible threads binding the forest community. This practice carried inherent risks. A raven might spot Daisy placing a nut cache and raid it before the intended squirrel arrived. A gift left too close to a fox's den could draw dangerous attention, yet they persisted, developing stealthy delivery methods, scattering seeds along fallen logs where only small creatures could navigate, or leaving mushrooms on north-facing rocks where scents dispersed slowly. Nordic folklore contains countless variations of this theme, from Tomt, who reward farmers for leaving porridge out on winter nights, to Hulderfolk, who punish those who hoard resources. These tales encode an ecological truth. Survival in marginal environments often depends on reciprocal generosity. The children's gifting followed subtle rules. They never fed predators directly, maintaining nature's balance. Food for rabbits was placed near protective thickets, while birds received theirs in open clearings safe from ambush. Anthropologists note similar nuanced food-sharing practices among indigenous Arctic peoples, where strict protocols govern winter meat distribution. In both cases, the act reinforces social bonds while acknowledging each creature's place in the ecosystem. When the Tomtebarnen found a weasel hunting near their gifting spots, they didn't interfere, but began leaving extra seeds further down the trail to divert prey animals from danger. Midwinter transformed these exchanges into vital lifelines. During the year's longest night, they held the Nærgransfest, the neighbors' feast, laying out a ceremonial meal where forest creatures could take what they needed without fear. This mirrored ancient Scandinavian Jule traditions, where excess food was left outdoors for wandering spirits. Evolutionary biologists suggest such rituals may have practical origins. Predator populations decrease when all species have adequate winter food, creating safer conditions come spring. The children observed unexpected returns from their generosity. Birds they'd fed dropped feathers perfect for insulating boots. Squirrels they'd provisioned unearthed hidden caches near their home during emergencies. Their mother called this the forest's interest, a quiet yield on kindness invested. Modern game theory models confirm that cooperative systems often outperform purely selfish strategies in fluctuating environments. The Tomtebarnen grasped this intuitively through lived experience rather than calculation. This ongoing exchange required reading subtle forest signs. When fewer rabbits came for their offerings, they knew a lynx was hunting nearby. An abundance of jays at the feeding stones suggested a hard frost coming. Their giving became both moral practice and information network, intertwining survival with ethics. Scandinavian folklore warns against gifts with covert strings attached. The difference between authentic generosity and manipulation lies in the giver's expectations. By winter's end, the habit of mutual aid had reshaped the children's perceptions. They noticed which creatures shared with their own kind, which defended territories selfishly, and how crisis could rewrite these patterns. Like all enduring myths, their stories suggest that human nature contains both selfishness and altruism, with survival depending on which tendency we nurture. Around the fire each night, these observations transformed into stories that would shape their understanding of the world. As darkness sealed the forest and cold gnawed at the edges of their pine root home, the Tomtebarnen gathered around their lichen wick lamp. The flickering light cast giant shadows of their small hands against the walls, while outside, the wind carved shapes from the snow. Their mother began tonight's story, as always, with the ancient formula: "This happened, and it did not happen." The words created a sacred space where reality and imagination could coexist. Harriet clutched a carved wooden hare while listening, its smooth surface worn shiny by generations of small fingers. The stories followed patterns the children could predict, yet never tired of hearing. Clever animals outwitting predators, lost children finding hidden villages beneath mushrooms, foolish wolves learning hard lessons. Cognitive scientists note that predictable narrative structures help children process fears, which explains why Daisy always requested repeats of the tale, where a field mouse escapes an owl, through quick thinking. Winter's storytelling served practical purposes masked as entertainment. Tales about the consequences of wandering too far reinforced important boundaries. Stories where characters shared food during famines echoed their own winter generosity rituals. Their mother wove practical knowledge into narratives: which berries cause stomachaches, how to spot weak ice on streams. Oral traditions in pre-literate societies often function this way, encoding survival information in memorable packages. The stories also preserved what psychologists call transgenerational memory. Tales about Grandfather Pine connected the children to ancestors they'd never met, while humorous accounts of Auntie Hedgehog's failed bakery venture kept family history alive. Neurobiological research suggests storytelling activates more brain regions than factual recall, creating deeper memory imprints. The children could recite word for word the description of their great-grandmother's journey from the southern woods, though none had been alive to witness it. Through repetition, the children absorbed core values unconsciously. When Sam acted selfishly with hazelnuts, Harriet simply retold the story of the greedy chipmunk who lost all his friends. No direct scolding was needed. Folklorists observe how traditional cultures use stories as indirect teaching tools, allowing listeners to draw their own moral conclusions. The contrast between the storytelling space and the harsh outdoors was stark. Beyond their fragile halo of light, the forest operated on brutal Darwinian principles. But within their circle, even the scariest tales, like the one about the ice drake who snatched disobedient children, ended with reminders of community protection. This balance between acknowledging danger and asserting safety appears universally in children's folklore across cultures. As winter progressed, the children began embellishing stories themselves. Tom added details about hidden treasure under the blackberry thicket, while Daisy invented new dialogue for the talking trout. Developmental psychologists recognize this collaborative storytelling as crucial for cognitive growth, exercising both creativity and social connection. Their mother listened carefully to these variations, recognizing when fantasy strayed too far from useful truth. The ritual always ended the same way. The lamp was dimmed to just one glowing lichen strand, and the final words spoken. The story sleeps now, but will wake when we call it. This closing affirmed narrative as a living thing, not merely entertainment, but a renewable resource. Anthropologists find similar concepts in Norse mythology, where poems and sagas were considered animate forces. Around that tiny flame, the Tomtebarnen learned to shape chaos into coherence. Their stories transformed random forest sounds into familiar creatures, gave names to their fears, and turned generations of experience into actionable wisdom. We still use narratives this way today, constructing meaning from life's randomness, finding patterns where none obviously exist. When the first thaw finally came, these stories would travel with them into the waking world, shaping how they interpreted the returning signs of life. The first drip of melted icicles from the pine branches marked more than winter's end. It heralded the arrival of the Tomtebarnen's new baby brother. His tiny hands, clutching at the air, seemed to embody the forest's awakening. Yet his dependence on the entire household revealed renewal as a collective endeavor. Tom observed how the infant instinctively grabbed his finger with surprising strength, while Harriet marveled at how something so small could reshape their daily rhythms entirely. Even the twins' rivalry softened as they took turns rocking the moss-lined cradle. Spring's return amplified familiar tasks with new urgency. Daisy gathered extra dandelion leaves for their mother's milk production, while Sam checked traps more diligently, knowing their protein needs had increased. Anthropologists note how infant care in traditional societies redistributes labor across age groups, strengthening communal bonds. The children discovered unexpected capacities. Tom found patience for night watches he'd previously resented, and Harriet mastered one-handed knot tying while cradling the baby. Their adaptation mirrored the forest itself, where budding branches and newborn creatures demanded adjustments from the entire ecosystem. The baby's presence heightened their awareness of life's cyclical nature. Watching him experience sensations for the first time, the texture of a pine needle, the scent of thawing earth, the older children unconsciously revisited their own earliest memories. Studies in developmental psychology suggest such intergenerational interactions help children form coherent life narratives. When the baby startled at his first encounter with a bumblebee, their mother recounted how Harriet had reacted similarly, weaving his experience into their shared history. Celebrations took on new meaning. The traditional first berry ceremony, previously just a marker of seasonal change, became an initiation ritual as the children smeared wild strawberry juice on the baby's lips. They laughed when he made a sour face, recognizing this same reaction in each of their past berry-tasting stories. Cultural historians observe how rites of passage reinforce collective identity in small societies. The Tomtebarnen weren't just celebrating the baby's growth. They were reaffirming their place in an ongoing lineage. Yet renewal carried reminders of mortality. Finding a dead chick fallen from its nest sobered their spring festivities, sparking questions about life's fragility. Their mother explained how fallen creatures nourished the soil that grew their food, introducing the concept of cyclical regeneration found in Norse mythology's imagery of Yggdrasil. Philosophers from Heraclitus to Nietzsche have grappled with this paradox, that life and death aren't opposites but interdependent phases. The children's individual growth accelerated through teaching. Tom became more careful with instructions after the baby attempted mimicking his careless knife grip. Harriet discovered gaps in her plant knowledge when she couldn't answer the twins' questions about which flowers were safe for the infant to touch. Research on the protégé effect confirms that teaching others consolidates our own understanding. Their family's expansion wasn't dividing attention, but multiplying their capacity for care and knowledge. By midsummer, the baby could sit upright to observe their activities, his eyes tracking the darting movements of damselflies as the older children pointed out each species' habits. This simple act, sharing attention, revealed how perception itself develops socially. The Tomtebarnen's world had expanded not just in population, but in depth of observation. Their story suggests that true renewal isn't about replacement or even growth, but about the expanding circles of connection each new life creates. This expansion of their tiny community mirrored the forest's own regenerative patterns, where every new shoot connects to established root systems. As the baby grasped his first berry independently, staining his fingers purple, the children recognized their own ongoing transformation, not as individuals, but as interconnected participants in something enduring. The rhythm of their lives now pulsed to the beat of both ancient cycles and new possibilities. Elsa Beskow's illustrations do more than accompany the Tomtebarnen story. They construct an entire sensory world. Her watercolors capture the precise way sunlight filters through birch leaves, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns. She renders the children's miniature scale not through exaggeration, but by meticulously depicting blades of grass towering over them like saplings, or a single strawberry requiring both hands to carry. This attention to naturalistic detail grounds the fantasy, making the impossible feel tangible. Art historians note how her technique blends scientific observation with imaginative precision. Every mushroom cap follows accurate botanical proportions while still seeming to harbor secret doors. The warmth of her palette belies the story's underlying tensions. Soft ochres and moss greens create an inviting atmosphere, yet attentive viewers notice subtle contrasts. The ominous depth of a fox's shadow lurking beyond a sunlit clearing, or storm clouds gathering at the edge of an otherwise cheerful meadow scene. This duality mirrors how Scandinavian folktales often wrap sober lessons in whimsical packaging. Beskow's art invites children to explore while subtly preparing them for life's complexities, much like the Tomtebarnen's mother weaving survival lessons into fireside stories. Her compositions reinforce thematic undercurrents through visual metaphors. When depicting the children spinning cotton grass into thread, she frames them beside a spider weaving its web, implying their labor connects them to the forest's larger fabric. In winter scenes, the family's glowing hearth appears as a tiny point of warmth against vast blue snowscapes, visually reinforcing their fragile yet resilient position in nature. These layered meanings allow her work to resonate differently across age groups. Children focus on the charming narratives, while adults recognize the meditations on community and self-reliance. Beskow revolutionized Swedish children's literature by treating picture books as cohesive artistic statements rather than merely illustrated texts. Her 1910 publication of Tomtebarnen established a template where illustrations carried equal narrative weight with prose, influencing generations of Scandinavian artists like Carl Larsson and Jan Löf. Unlike the overly sentimental children's art of her era, she presented nature as both enchanting and demanding. Berries glow jewel-like on the page, yet brambles retain their realistic thorns. This refusal to sanitize the natural world gave her work lasting credibility. Her enduring appeal lies in this balance between realism and wonder. Modern studies in developmental psychology confirm that children engage more deeply with art that respects their intelligence, images that offer discoverable details rather than obvious explanations. A Beskow illustration might hide a ladybug in the corner of a mushroom house, rewarding repeated viewings. Adults revisiting her work often find new undertones, the way a character's posture conveys resilience, or how seasonal changes mirror emotional arcs. This dual accessibility explains her cross-generational staying power. Swedish families commonly pass down Beskow's books through multiple generations, with grandparents pointing out the same hidden details they discovered as children. Museums display her original paintings not in children's sections, but alongside major Nordic artists, recognizing their artistic merit beyond educational value. Her work blurs the line between children's entertainment and cultural artifact, much like the Tomtebarnen stories blur the line between simple tales and survival manuals. By rooting fantasy in tangible sensory details, Beskow created a bridge between imagination and lived experience, a bridge that has carried readers into her world for over a century. Just as the Tomtebarnen navigate their forest with equal parts caution and curiosity, Beskow's art invites us to explore life's wonders without denying its challenges. This nuanced approach shares DNA with the darker strands of Nordic folklore, where light and shadow exist in creative tension. Beneath the gnarled roots of oaks dwell the Tomte, gnome-like caretakers who reward tidy farms but curse sloppy ones. Among birch groves flit the Ljusalfa, luminous beings neither angelic nor malicious, merely indifferent to human concerns. These aren't characters in fables, but entities woven into Scandinavia's ecological consciousness for millennia. The Tomtebarnen's miniature existence echoes this worldview, where humans occupy just one layer of a complex living tapestry. Historical records reveal how seriously rural communities took these forest dwellers. 18th century Swedish church logs document farmers leaving bowls of porridge for tomtar to guarantee livestock health. Icelandic sagas describe entire villages altering hunting routes to avoid disturbing elf settlements. Such practices weren't mere superstition. They encoded sustainable land use principles. When folklore warned that felling certain trees invited misfortune, it often coincided with locations where deforestation caused landslides. The stories served as ecological warnings wrapped in supernatural terms. The Nordic forest buzzes with invisible presences that defy human categorization. Beneath the gnarled roots of oaks dwell the Tomte, gnome-like caretakers who reward tidy farms but curse sloppy ones. Among birch groves flit the Ljusalfa, luminous beings, neither angelic nor malicious, merely indifferent to human concerns. These aren't characters in fables, but entities woven into Scandinavia's ecological consciousness for millennia. The Tomtebarnen's miniature existence echoes this worldview, where humans occupy just one layer of a complex living tapestry. Historical records reveal how seriously rural communities took these forest dwellers. 18th century Swedish church logs document farmers leaving bowls of porridge for tomtar to guarantee livestock health. Icelandic sagas describe entire villages altering hunting routes to avoid disturbing elf settlements. Such practices weren't mere superstition. They encoded sustainable land use principles. When folklore warned that felling certain trees invited misfortune, it often coincided with locations where deforestation caused landslides. The stories served as ecological warnings wrapped in supernatural terms. The duality of these beings reflects nature's own contradictions. A huldra might lead lost children to safety or lure men to their deaths, depending on how respectfully they treated the forest. Norwegian folk tales describe Nokken water spirits drowning arrogant swimmers while saving those who sang the proper hymns. This moral flexibility mirrored people's lived experience of nature, both provider and threat. The Tomtebarnen stories inherit this ambiguity, presenting a world where kindness and danger coexist without contradiction. Collected folktales show regional variations that track environmental differences. Coastal communities feared Mara spirits that cause night paralysis, likely folk explanations for sleep disorders exacerbated by harsh winters. Inland forest dwellers spoke more of skogsro, seductive forest guardians who tested woodcutters' restraint. These variations suggest folklore evolved as an interpretive framework for local ecological challenges. When the Tomtebarnen's mother warns of the Guldran who steals forgetful children, she's channeling this tradition of making environmental hazards memorable through narrative. Archaeological finds corroborate folklore's practical roots. Viking-era graves sometimes contain spirit stones, rocks with natural holes believed to ward off supernatural harm. Modern analysis shows these were often flint nodules containing fossils, suggesting ancient people interpreted unusual geological formations through mythological lenses. Similarly, the Tomtebarnen stories transform mundane forest phenomena. A fox's cry becomes the skogsbo's whistle. Northern lights signal the feasting of dead ancestors. This belief system fostered a particular mindset toward the unknown. Unlike Western cultures that divide the natural and supernatural, Nordic traditions assumed constant interaction between realms. Church records from the 1600s show priests struggling to stamp out tree whispering, the practice of consulting birch trees before making decisions. Farmers maintained fridskog, peace forests, untouched groves believed to house protective spirits. These weren't primitive beliefs, but sophisticated systems for regulating human exploitation of vulnerable ecosystems. The Tomtebarnen's world taps into this deep cultural memory. Their careful negotiations with the forest echo ancient protocols for coexisting with unseen forces. Modern psychology recognizes such mythic thinking as a coping mechanism for life's uncertainties. We still create narratives to explain randomness today. When the children leave gifts for forest creatures, they're participating in a ritual much older than their story, one that acknowledges our eternal negotiation with forces beyond our control. This folklore ultimately reveals less about supernatural beings than about human psychology. The stories codify collective anxieties about starvation, isolation, and vulnerability to nature's whims. Yet they also express resilience, the conviction that proper conduct and community could negotiate these dangers. The Tomtebarnen inherit this worldview, where respect and reciprocity become survival strategies rather than moral abstractions. Their tiny scale magnifies a universal human predicament. We're all small creatures navigating systems vaster than ourselves. The Tomtebarnen's miniature existence mirrors humanity's fragile position in an indifferent universe. Though their struggles play out beneath pine needles rather than stars, the parallels resonate. Their smallness against the towering forest reflects our own cosmic insignificance. Yet within this vulnerability lies their strength. Unlike humans, who often resist their limitations, the children embrace theirs, turning constraints into creative adaptations. Their ability to find refuge in a hollow log or navigate by moss patterns suggests that meaning emerges not despite obstacles, but through our response to them. Jungian psychology offers insight into why these small beings captivate us. The Tomtebarnen embody archetypes from the collective unconscious: the vulnerable child, the wise elder, the nurturing mother. Their story structure mirrors mythic patterns Joseph Campbell identified: ordinary beings navigating extraordinary worlds through cooperation and cleverness. The forest becomes both literal setting and psychological landscape, representing the unconscious terrain we all must traverse. When Sam memorizes animal paths or Harriet deciphers weather signs, they model how humans construct meaning from chaos. Modern life amplifies our existential dilemmas while obscuring natural solutions. The Tomtebarnen's labor has immediate, tangible results. Spun thread becomes warmth. Gathered berries prevent starvation. Contrast this with today's abstract work, often detached from visible outcomes, leaving many grasping for purpose. Their winter generosity rituals demonstrate Marcel Mauss' anthropological findings. Gift economies strengthen social bonds more effectively than transactional exchanges. Our alienation stems partly from losing such concrete reciprocity. The children's storytelling traditions highlight another modern deficiency. Around their fire, tales serve multiple functions: education, stress relief, identity formation. Neuroscience confirms narrative's role in brain development, with children who hear family stories showing greater emotional resilience. Our digital age has fragmented these communal narrative spaces, replacing them with isolated consumption. The Tomtebarnen remind us that stories thrive in shared contexts, intertwining teller and listener. Their seasonal awareness offers an antidote to modern detachment. Living by nature's rhythms, they develop what psychologist Ellen Langer calls mindfulness, engaged presence with their environment. Unlike our artificial 24/7 world, their activities align with natural cycles, creating built-in periods for rest and renewal. Studies on circadian rhythms show how artificial lighting disrupts sleep and cognition, suggesting we've paid a physiological price for conquering night. The tale's deepest lesson may be its rejection of heroic individualism. The Tomtebarnen survive through distributed skills: Tom's height, Harriet's memory, Daisy's dexterity. This reflects evolutionary anthropology findings that human advancement relied less on lone genius than collective intelligence. Their community resembles traditional societies where elders' knowledge, adults' labor, and children's curiosity form an interdependent system. Contemporary applications abound. Urban farming initiatives echo their seasonal food gathering, while mutual aid networks mirror their winter sharing. Forest schooling programs deliberately recreate their experiential learning. Even tiny house movements capture their ethos of thriving within limits. These aren't nostalgic reversals, but adaptations of timeless principles. The Tomtebarnen story endures because it disguises profound existential questions in accessible metaphors. Their struggles with scarcity, purpose, and belonging reflect our own, stripped of modern complications. By framing life's challenges as concrete forest obstacles, the tale makes philosophical concepts tangible. Like all lasting myths, it provides not answers, but perspectives, a miniature world revealing our own in sharp relief. The final line of the Tomtebarnen's story, "Their story will never end," reveals a fundamental truth about meaningful narratives. Unlike modern stories constrained by rigid conclusions, this tale remains open, inviting new interpretations with each telling. Folklorists call this the perpetual story phenomenon, where certain narratives survive centuries by adapting to cultural shifts while retaining core truths. The Tomtebarnen's endurance stems from its layered simplicity, a surface-level adventure that gradually reveals profound existential questions about community, labor, and our place in nature. Psychological research on narrative transportation explains why such stories resonate across generations. When we engage with the Tomtebarnen's world, our brains don't merely process information, we simulate lived experiences. Neuroscientists observe similar neural activity when people recount personal memories and immerse themselves in familiar tales. This blurring of boundaries between story and lived experience creates the sensation that certain narratives continue beyond their pages. The children's cyclical routines, seasonal preparations, communal storytelling mirror this continuity, reinforcing the sense that their world persists even when we're not observing it. Comparative mythology reveals patterns behind such enduring stories. Like Aesop's fables or Native American teaching tales, the Tomtebarnen narrative uses miniature proxies, tiny children facing giant forests, to explore universal human struggles. Anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss noted how mythic narratives often compress complex societal values into symbolic conflicts. Here, the juxtaposition of fragility and resilience becomes a meditation on human perseverance. The story's deceptive simplicity allows it to function differently for children, learning about cooperation, and adults contemplating mortality. The concept of mythic time further explains the tale's open-endedness. Unlike historical narratives bound to specific eras, mythical stories exist in perpetual recurrence. Mircea Eliade's studies of archaic cultures describe how rituals reanimate foundational myths, making past events eternally present. Similarly, each reading of the Tomtebarnen's story renews its relevance. Their winter preparations resonate during economic uncertainties. Their communal ethics speak to modern isolation. This plasticity ensures the narrative never fossilizes into mere nostalgia. Cognitive scientist Mark Turner argues that parable-style stories endure because they function as mental models, frameworks for interpreting new experiences. When faced with contemporary challenges, we unconsciously reference these narrative templates. The Tomtebarnen's adaptation strategies become metaphorical tools for navigating modern life's complexities. Their ability to find abundance in limitation offers counter-programming to today's scarcity mindset, while their reciprocal relationship with nature models sustainable thinking. The story's unresolved quality also mirrors life itself. Just as the children's tale continues indefinitely, our own stories lack definitive endings, only transitions between phases. Developmental psychologists find that individuals comfortable with narrative ambiguity demonstrate higher resilience. By refusing tidy closure, the tale trains us to embrace ongoing processes rather than fixed outcomes. Its cyclical structure reflects natural systems where decay nourishes new growth, a concept echoed in everything from composting to cultural renewal. Ultimately, the Tomtebarnen's unending story reflects humanity's own unfinished journey. Like the children gathering knowledge season by season, we accumulate wisdom incrementally, each generation inheriting and modifying collective narratives. The story persists not as a relic, but as a living toolkit, its lessons adapting fluidly to contemporary needs while preserving timeless truths about community, meaning, and our delicate coexistence with the world. The Tomtebarnen's story endures because it reflects our own existential journey in miniature. These tiny creatures navigating an immense forest mirror our struggle to find meaning in a vast, indifferent universe. Their solutions, community, shared labor, seasonal awareness, offer timeless alternatives to modern alienation. Consider how their lessons might apply to your world. Where can cooperation replace competition? How might limitations spark creativity? The forest remains open for visitation whenever life's scale overwhelms you. Like the children gathering around their fire, we too can carve out spaces where stories transform isolation into connection and vulnerability into unexpected strength.